Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Crop protection chemicals are vital for modern agriculture, and the regulatory environment around pesticides in particular over the past several years has been changing rather rapidly. Last week, the House Ag Committee held a hearing to delve into several aspects of rural policy. Amongst them was EPA's pesticide regulations. Dr. Rebecca Larson, the Chief Scientist and Vice President of Governmental Affairs for the Western Sugar Cooperative, testified. She joins us now. Dr. Larson, thanks for joining us this week.
So much for having me here today.
Let's talk a little bit about how changing EPA pesticide regulations have impacted the sugar beet industry. What have you seen?
So not only are pesticides slower to come to market when we need new tools, but they're also being allowed to be used in much more restrictive ways.
In what way, or how do beet growers see this impacting their farms?
Well, we had an emergence of a new weed in Colorado and Nebraska across our cooperative called Palmer amaranth. That's a very aggressive weed species that goes from seed to setting seed in under 2 weeks. We needed a Section 18 for a new herbicide to be able to protect our crop. It took almost 18 months to get that product approved through EPA.
And when you think about that from the scientific perspective, 18 months of Palmer amaranth growing and throwing seeds, what's the implication for growers across the rest of the region?
That's a really hard weed to try and get under control. It sets a couple 100,000 seeds per plant. So if you have just a few of them uncontrolled for a growing season or two, that can be a really hard thing to rein back in. It limits the ability of growers to be able to rent land. 60% of our farmers actually rent the ground that they grow their sugar beets on. Other farmers that own that land don't want sugar beets on there if they know that weed problem is going to be exacerbated in other rotations. And we lost across our cooperative 2 tons to the acre, which cost our Colorado and Nebraska growers about $8 million in revenue.
Wow, so it is a real hit to growers' bottom lines. You had the chance to address the Ag Committee. And Dr. Larson, what was your message? What can the Ag Committee do?
They need to exercise sound science in all of their decision making. Some of the most groundbreaking and impactful regulations are pending right now, set to be finalized in late August, called the herbicide strategy. It's part of EPA's coming into compliance with their Endangered Species Act obligations. There's some things in there that are still unworkable that are going to make it very difficult for our farmers, most specifically around the spray drift buffers.
Just leaving too much spray drift buffer over too many acres, effectively. Is that the concern?
Yeah, it's taking too much productive agricultural ground out of production. It'll take 90,000 acres of sugar beets across the industry out of production in a worst case scenario, which is about a $200 million a year impact. But more importantly, it's going to prevent us from being able to produce seed. We grow a hybrid crop. We need somebody to grow commercial seed for us. If they have these buffers in place for these small seed productions, it makes seed production impossible.
Absolutely. So with this packet of regulations coming out here very shortly, what's your advice to growers? How can we prepare for this?
Everybody needs to stay very vigilant and engaged. They need to hear from commodity groups. Oftentimes we let the crop protection companies speak for us, but in these types of instances, we have very different value propositions. So the grower voice needs to be at the table. And we also need to lean on the other agencies. There's an interagency working group that USDA is a part of advising EPA on. And USDA understands American farmers much better.
We've got to turn to the experts when it comes to complicated matters like this. Dr. Rebecca Larson, Chief Scientist, Vice President of Governmental Affairs at Western Sugar Cooperative. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And it's time to talk markets. Joining us this week is Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. And Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me here. Thank you.
You know, last week you wrote about the World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates release. And
Right.
in your commentary, you said grain market, bear markets, end not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Oh, absolutely.
And my question is, are we whimpering here in these grain markets?
Well, we've certainly begun to cry. I don't know if it's developed into a complete whimper at this point in time, but I think we're close. You know, we've absorbed a lot of bad news, and you know, I think that's the other thing to keep in mind, that when it sounds the most bearish is, of course, when we've got all of that kind of mixed into the batter, and we've exhausted to the downside. I wouldn't say we're exactly there yet, but I think we're very close. I mean, from a producer standpoint, this is not time to panic.
Okay.
Maybe it's time to remain patient, and we'll start looking for maybe some better things ahead as we get some short covering markets. So.
Short covering in the market. Dan,
Yes.
that's an expectation I'm hearing from a lot of commodity traders, market watchers right now. Talk to us about why short covering could provide a little bump here in at least corn and soybeans.
Well, here once again, we've taken a lot of this bearish news. We know the crops look like a substantial crop, maybe some record crops here in the U.S. this year. Worldwide, certainly more than ample supplies. So, but we know all that. That's not a surprise to the market any longer. So when you look over at where the speculative positions, particularly the large specs are on this point in time, record short positions in corn and soybeans for this time of year. So, really, where do you go from there? I mean, do you really continue to pile on? Or do you start looking for greener grasses elsewhere? And I think that's going to be the case. And we don't print contrary opinion numbers anymore. That used to be a good indicator. But one of my favorite sayings came from Mark Twain, which is, when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. And I think we're there.
All right. Yeah. So we did not see too much of a market response, upside or downside, from last week's WASDE release. Dan, market, did it kind of just come in where you were anticipating these numbers?
Oh, certainly. I mean, a few tweaks here and there. And again, the government was probably a little generous on increasing the usage, particularly in corn. Still pushed over 2 billion bushels, which we haven't seen for 5 or 6 years. That said, I think if there was any other news around that would have sparked excitement, certainly we could have maybe seen a little bounce out of that. As it stands, we just kind of drifted back into lower lows. Again, maybe not quite done yet, but I think we're inching pretty close to that final push to the down.
One industry that seems to be responding well to these lower commodity prices is ethanol. I understand we're seeing record run rates now for ethanol production. Dan, do we expect that to continue for a little while?
Well, and again, that's kind of mixed into the blend as well. The USDA has bumped up the ethanol usage for next year, so expecting those margins to continue to stay strong. And of course, with the overall energy situation, there's no reason to think it won't. So is that enough to lift us out of here? No, that's again a factor that's pretty well assumed is going to happen year in, year out. So I don't think it's going to be a market leading factor to push us higher.
All right. So for now, for at least corn growers, the plan is be patient, watch this market, hope to get some good news to develop. Is there a price point you see, Dan, that you ought to start moving in with some sales? Well,
and any time you're in a move like this, if you see a 10% rally, you probably have to reward it. I mean, granted, it's not going to sound great at this point in time, but the greatest hope at this point is you're going to yield your way out of the issues this year and into profitability.
That's what it comes back to. If your prices aren't going to be high, you better grow a lot of it. It's the moral of that story.
Exactly.
When we come back, we'll talk wheat and soybeans as well, so we'll have more with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with AD2 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. We're talking market moves this week with Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. And Dan, we've talked for quite a while about the downtrend in wheat prices, both domestically and globally.
Sure.
We've now got the supply and demand estimates behind us. Is there reason yet for optimism here in this wheat market?
Well, maybe not quite, but here again, I think with the rest of the complex, I think we're edging closer to it. Certainly domestically, our wheat crop looks like it's in great shape this year, although our acreage is certainly nothing to brag about. There are some issues in Europe, Russia, Ukraine, not as big a crops there as anticipated, yet particularly when you go to the Black Sea, they've got old crop inventory they're trying to liquidate, which has really kind of pressured that world market at this point in time. But once you move beyond there, then I think there's some reason to think that there could be some more demand shaping back up for the U.S. We are cheap enough. I don't know if you're going to see a lot of switch over to feeding wheat, but I mean there's a probability or possibility of that. So the wheat's the one that's got to lead corn, especially. It led it to the downside. It has certainly been the bear market all the way down, and I think it's going to be the one that's going to have to kind of resurrect corn from its depths as well. So it's just, again, I think we're close to it. Seasonally, we're already past the area. Okay. July usually is your seasonal low for wheat, so maybe we're starting to move into that realm here finally.
At this point, for wheat traders watching a market looking for that piece of optimistic news, Dan, do you expect it to come on the production side at this time of year, or are we going to really be watching for demand indicators?
Well, I mean, granted, the production is kind of it's been dialed in. We pretty much know what we're going to have for this year's crop. both domestically and worldwide. Granted, they are planting wheat down in Argentina at this point in time. But that's probably not going to be as big an influence as what happens within Europe. So I think it's going to be demand. Demand is going to be the one that has to lead us back out of here. So.
All right. Well, let's take a look over at the soybean market,
Sure,
Dan, because
sure.
that's one that had so much optimism. A year ago at this point, we were all fired up about soybeans. We've since come down. We've taken some of the bloom off that rose. Like corn and wheat, are we bottoming here in beans?
Very close. You've got new crop beans close to the $10 mark. I think could probably test that, maybe even get into the 990s before we're said and done. But that's relatively close. So granted, when you look at the fundamental picture, nothing looks worse than what soybeans do at this point in time. South America, even with the problems they had, you're looking at another record production out of that area. Granted, it remains very competitive. They have certainly taken over the export market, but those inventories are beginning to drift. We should see some demand shift back to the U.S. market. So here again, too, it's like I say, I think we're within that final 5 or 10% that should finish off to the downside. And seasonally, then we should start looking at it. Not that we're going to see major rallies, but we should look at improvements from at least where we stand here today.
Looking across the sea, China, do we expect them to come back into the soybean market, or are Brazil and Argentina going to feed their needs?
Well, they have been, last month, big imports into China. And again, the majority of it has been Brazil, Argentina, particularly Brazil. Argentina is kind of filling in the slot this year since their production has kicked back. But certainly we're reaching that end of the line for their supplies. And that should, as particularly as we move into September, October, that should start shifting back to the United States.
All right. Can we find some optimism in the soy oil complex, Dan?
Well, oil has been the one market that has not been devastated as much. Boy, it goes in fits and starts. We'll get some kind of a news as far as what's going to happen in the renewable fuels industry or production or an issue with palm oil. Not enough to really get it off a dead center, but it is the lone member of the soy complex that doesn't keep going into lower lows, where meal and beans, of course, continue to.
True. So it is the lone bright spot.
Maybe the supportive
complex.
factor at this point in time.
Supportive factor in the complex. It's good to find supportive factors in a summer like this when watching these prices.
Absolutely.
Potentially bottom. Dan Huber, thank you so much for joining us this week and sharing your insight.
Very good. Thank you.
Greg Soulje now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Yes, Greg Soulje says it's been hot in the Pacific Northwest. And Greg, any chance folks in that region are going to get a break this week?
Really a heat wave weather pattern, a protracted one. There'll be some subtle relief. There's already some of that here early in the week, maybe down from the triple-digit readings, but still ranging through the 90s as far north as Idaho, and of course back west towards the Cascades and into sections of the Willamette Valley, Rogue River Basin, and east of there on Burns and parts of the Pacific Northwest as well. About 150,000 plus acres are up in smoke. It's these dry-based thunderstorms. You can build the cumulonimbus clouds. You get a couple of half dozen drops of rain, but more lightning than anything. That strikes the tender vegetation and or forest areas, and we're off to the races with fire potential and ongoing fires out there. Meanwhile, through Big Sky Country across the Dakotas, kind of a boundary that separates amazingly cool air through the southern Canadian prairie and the Dakotas. Nice we had the recent warmth trying to push those spring grains towards maturity versus the heat across the divide and points on southward. There is some semblance of a frontal boundary offshore, and by the middle to late portions of the week, the jet stream begins to dig in a little bit into the Pacific Northwest, but that just heightens the ridge farther north into the Canadian prairie, and again downstream a couple of thunderstorm clusters out of Big Sky and across the Dakotas. But that is the relief, at least for sections of the immediate Pacific Northwest later in the week. Heat eases, marine layer air moisture as well on in, and so that should help to alleviate the fire potential, combat it, and generate hopefully a couple of meaningful showers. Yeah, that's a tropical system out there in the Pacific. It is that time of the year. Another trip off that we maybe are quickly moving out of this El Nino to a neutral state to a La Nina setup. Note the cool off across the plains into the southern plains. Gone that 108-degree heat across Kansas, suppressed south of the Red River, but we still have plenty of low-level moisture. The monsoon season is well underway with some flash flood potential, downpours of rain, as well as the lightning potential. Very little change in the southwestern weather pattern here. Very heavy irrigation demands, same through the valleys of California. Some warmth and humidity working northward into parts of the Plain States areas as we move on through the middle and late portions of the week.
Lots of corn tasseling here in my travels across the northern Corn Belt recently. Greg, weather look fairly benign next week?
It does, but that gives us an opportunity to assess the back 40 where there was green snap or lodging or blowdown or drowned out fields. But amazingly, despite, and in spite of all the severe weather, about 65-70% of the corn is good to excellent. So again, some issues into parts of the western Corn Belt from a recovery standpoint, more so where we saw that derecho race out of Iowa across Illinois and Indiana, and along the I-70 corridor on southward where most of the meaningful rain has missed out except for those areas east and southeast of St. Louis. The showers will be a benefit here, especially through Indiana and Ohio. Cooler, drier air, amazing for July through the Great Lakes, northern and central plains. A little weak frontal boundary through the upper Midwest. We'll sag on southward, but again, most of the organized rains through the middle part of the week through the I-70 corridor on southward as the runoff and cleanup and all that continues on, not only from the storm-ravaged central Corn Belt, but the flooding in the Missouri Valley and parts of southern Illinois. Warmer weather and a couple of thunderstorms out across parts of the northern and central high plains, with the heat parked along the divide. The monsoon season continues on in the southwest. A couple of thunderstorms with some tropical moisture off the Pacific into Baja. More flooding rainfall into parts of eastern Texas, and this is just going to be maybe a building story in through the Delta region and the deep south and southeastern states. Warmer, drier environments, lower humidity, more seasonal temperatures across the south end of the plains coming off some of that 108-degree heat. Tropical system in through Baja. The tropics across the Gulf are quiet. Overall showers and thunderstorms, though, might continue on through Texas and the Delta. Amazing. A year ago, it was dry and drought-ridden in that part of the country.
Looking all the way to the east, they'd like some rain in Virginia. Greg, any chance?
Yes, this week you will get significant rain and significant drought improvement. Showers and thunderstorms over the eastern states through the Ohio Valley, settling south and east. Amazingly cooler, drier, delightful mid to late July weather for the Corn Belt areas, along for those streams and rivers to ease on down. Assess the back 40 coming off the severe and flooding areas over the western, central, and southern Corn Belt as the showers and thunderstorms continue on for the late portion of the week from New England on southward into the Mid-Atlantic region. There you go, nearby frontal boundary. Disturbances continue to track along. The tropics itself are quiet. There may be a wave coming across Florida, picking up showers and thunderstorms here, but as we move on through the late portion of the week, significant drought relief for the Mid-Atlantic region and the eastern Gulf, but more flooding rainfall into parts of eastern Texas.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back, folks, to This Week in Agribusiness. With the Cattle on Feed report out this past week, I felt it was time to dig into what's happening big picture here in this cattle industry. Joining us to discuss the market is Dr. Derrell Peel. He's a professor, livestock marketing specialist with Oklahoma State University. And Dr. Peel, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Mike.
Let's talk first and foremost about demand. We're in the peak of summer. I understand seasonally beef demand trickles back a little bit at this time of year. Seasonally, how are we faring in 2024?
Well, we have seen, box beef wholesale prices drop back since July 4th. But again, the heat of the summer, once we get past July 4th, we don't really have any holidays. So grilling backs off a little bit. It's very hot, middle of the summer. And not only that, but, the high-end restaurant traffic slows down in the summer as well. So we are seeing some drop back, but I think it's just seasonal. I don't think it's an indication of any fundamental weakness in beef demand, which, all things considered, remains remarkably robust.
It does. It certainly does. Consumers are still getting out there. They're buying that high-quality American beef, and that always puts the question, Dr. Peel, right back onto supply, the same question we've had for 4 years now in this cattle market. Let's talk about what you're seeing. I understand this week you had the chance to visit a feeder cattle sale. Prices still looking at record levels there at the feeder cattle auctions?
We've seen just a slight pullback in the last week or two. Again, heat of the summer kinds of things. But really, in a bigger sense, a bigger picture sense, we're still at record levels with these cattle markets. It's pretty clear that these markets are very strong. They're driven by very tight supplies that are still getting tighter as we go forward. So, we're continuing to move forward with the same kind of fundamentals that we've been talking about.
Fundamentally, I know that we were concerned about carcass weights climbing as we were looking at lower corn prices here into the spring and early summer. Given the heat, Dr. Peel, are carcass weights starting to come back down?
They have come down a little bit finally, but we stayed high. Normally, carcass weights for steers and heifers drop through the first half of the year to a low right about mid-year. We did not see much drop at all from February until very recently. They've dropped a little bit, but the last weekly carcass data we had, steer carcass weights were still running 27 pounds heavier than a year ago. So, again, I don't know if we'll see a seasonal bottom here and then we go up. There's some uncertainty about where we go going forward, but the bottom line is we have produced more beef with less animals this year than we expected to. So beef production's down so far this year, but it's not down as much as we thought it would be.
Okay, so we're still seeing that tonnage come across. It's just in the form of more pounds on those existing carcasses. But you mentioned the numbers, the total number of head just aren't there. That's not where we've been for 4 or 5 years. Dr. Peel, the question is, are we rebuilding this herd as of yet? We've got no drought in the center part of the United States. Is that helping at least those producers start that process?
Yeah, anecdotally, what I hear is that some producers are beginning to retain some heifers. We do generally have better forage conditions. But I think it's a slow process. I think producers are being relatively cautious. They're not just jumping out there very aggressively. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. Again, forage conditions are better now, but there's an eye towards, rebuilding La Nina and the possibility of returning drought conditions. That's one factor. Obviously, just the fact that interest rates are so much higher right now, the cost of financing herd rebuilding is going to be higher. And producers really just have to get to a point where they believe that we're going to have enough good prices for long enough to make it worth it. In the short run, they've been pretty content to just sell things and take advantage of these higher markets.
Well, they certainly have. And I know one of the things driving that shrinking cow supply are the prices being paid for cull cows, Dr. Peel. We saw that move into record territory last year. I know it's been bouncing around. Are we still seeing packers ready to really write a big check for those culled animals?
Oh, I tell you, these cull cow prices are very high, and that's the one part of beef production that's down sharply this year. Cow slaughter is down about 14-15%. Both beef and dairy cow slaughter to this point have been down sharply. So, if you think of non-fed beef production, if you will, cow and bull slaughter, it's down sharply. That's keeping these cow prices high, and it's also driving tremendously high wholesale value for beef, for processing beef or beef trimmings that support our ground beef market. So that market is red hot right now.
With the ground beef market being red hot, Dr. Peel, do you expect to see a surge in lean trimmings coming in from import?
We are seeing an increase in imports that partially offsets that. It's driven by those supply fundamentals and those high prices. It doesn't fully offset it by any means, and it doesn't really change the overall trajectory, if you will, of our market. But certainly we would expect to see, and we are seeing, an increase in beef imports. Not only are the prices high, the supply low in the U.S., but the strong dollar that's a headwind for beef exports is also a favorable factor in terms of importing more beef to the extent that we can find beef that fits into our market.
Globally, as you look around the world, are there other countries looking to fill in U.S. beef's market share as our exports might struggle a little bit?
Yeah, there's always that, major exporting countries. But again, U.S. beef is pretty unique. The U.S. and Canada really have a unique fed beef kind of a product. And so beef that could come from other countries, be it Brazil or Argentina, other beef producing exporting countries, there's only a limited amount to which they can supply the same type of beef. So depending on the market, there's still a very strong role for U.S. beef in those other markets.
There certainly is. Dr. Derrell Peel, Oklahoma State University, thanks so much for joining us this week and sharing your insights on the cattle market.
Great to be with you, Mike.
We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we return.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. It's hard to believe, but the Farm Progress Show will be here before we know it. And this year, for the first time, the Clean Fuels Alliance and their member company PepsiCo will be on hand at a booth. Director of Communications Heather Buchter of Clean Fuels Alliance America joins us now to talk about this collaboration. And Heather, what's bringing this together? What's bringing PepsiCo and Clean Fuels Alliance together at Farm Progress?
Well, Clean Fuels has been a long-time attendee at the Farm Progress Show, but this is our first year actually exhibiting, and we're really excited to be a part of it. We are partnering with PepsiCo, which just became a member of Clean Fuels about a year ago. And really, we have a shared commitment with PepsiCo just to highlight regenerative agriculture programs and fuel production. So just a really great synergy between the two organizations.
So it's been a year that Clean Fuels Alliance has been working with PepsiCo. What other initiatives have you guys worked on together?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. So our Clean Fuels technical team worked really closely with PepsiCo while they've been implementing biodiesel and renewable diesel into their fleet, which by the way is one of the largest in North America. They even have trucks that are running on B100, so that's 100% biodiesel. So it really is just proving their investment in a fuel that's American-made, from soybeans, canola oil, other oil crops that are grown right in the Midwest. So, we both really depend on farmers to fuel and feed our world, and just a great way to showcase that and the farmer impact at the Farm Progress Show this year. So we're really excited to make those connections.
Absolutely. And of course, when you come to the Farm Progress Show, it's the face for farmers to really get hands-on and up close and personal with the stuff on display. Tell us a little bit, Heather, what can we expect to see at the Clean Fuels Alliance PepsiCo booth?
So we're going to be located in the northeast quadrant. It's lot 1124, which I know no one's going to remember that right now, but what you can look for is a big PepsiCo truck, because that'll be an easy way to spot us. And that truck is actually one that runs on 100% biodiesel, so we'll have that on display. We'll also have some experts on hand just to explain how biodiesel and renewable diesel work, how they can seamlessly be integrated into farming operations. And we'll also showcase, how much soybean oil, which is like 1 billion pounds a month, over 1 billion pounds a month, actually goes into clean fuel production. So that's all on the fuel side. But when it comes to food, we know PepsiCo, I've heard, is going to have snacks on hand. So that's always a draw. So you make sure to come visit us. We're going to get you educated on what we're doing, not only with the fuel side, but also PepsiCo's regenerative agriculture and sustainable farming programs, and of course, decarbonizing its fleet too. So a lot to showcase.
It is a lot to come, and it's in the Northeast Quadrant, the Farm Progress Show this year, booth 1124, Clean Fuels Alliance teaming up with PepsiCo. Heather, if we've got viewers who want to learn more ahead of time, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, you can always go to cleanfuels.org. That's our website. We've got just so much information on there. It's really a great resource. Or if you are a podcast person, make sure to listen to our Better Cleaner Now podcast. We launched that earlier this year, and we have had a host of experts and influential guests on there, just really taking a deep dive into the hot topics that surround biodiesel, renewable diesel, and even sustainable aviation fuel, which is on the horizon. So another great resource for you. That's the Better Cleaner Now podcast and cleanfuels.org.
Fantastic. Lots to learn as this industry grows. Heather, we look forward to seeing you in Boone next month. You can learn more at cleanfuels.org.
Greg Soulje is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Greg, it sounds like a pretty quiet week next week, but there are chances for rain. Who's going to see what and when?
For a change where we actually need rain, with the exception of maybe parts of Texas and the lower Mississippi Valley areas. Otherwise, it will be out here through the Mid-Atlantic region, down into the southeastern states, the heart of the Cotton Belt country, through the Tennessee Valley and into areas of the Delta. Amazing, last year it was blowtorch to the Delta, sugarcane lost, rice fields lost. This year may end up being too much of a good thing. So significant rainfall here, and look at how the severe weather will be stacked up from New England into eastern Texas, quarter, maybe a half inch, and that'll be primarily through the first half of the week, I-70 corridor on southward. So yeah, aggravating some of those worst areas through Missouri and Illinois, but as a whole, a much quieter weather picture for the Corn Belt areas. There may be a system into Texas, lowering pressures there, offshore of Florida as well, down through the Caribbean, and a feature as well out across the Pacific. It is that time of the year, busyness in the tropics.
Greg, what's your forecast look like as the calendar flips to August?
Nothing really too ominous on the heat scene for much of the eastern Corn Belt areas. So if you have late planted varieties on the corn side, no real big issues with stress or strain there. And overall, we're in relatively comfortable shape for fair going season through much of the Corn Belt, warmth in through Florida. There is the hot ridge over the western part of the country centered on the divide. And the wet weather pattern really here in the next couple of weeks to come is focused south and east. So we do need some dry time, upper Midwest, central and southern Corn Belt locales. You're going to get it. Wet weather for the Canadian Prairie, the southeastern states, Gulf Coast in through Florida, tropics getting busy in the Pacific, and they're going to ramp up in a hurry off the Atlantic Basin.
Does that heat spread for the week of August 5th?
Yes, it does. And here it is right over the middle part of the country. And as we were talking with Sarah Muirhead on Feedstuffs on the podcast here recently, I think that hot dome may actually be back into play towards Farm Progress later in the month of August. But a widespread heat wave for the middle part of the country, some cooling into the northeast and New England, out across the Pacific Northwest as well. And an absence of any significant moisture for much of the Corn Belt. A slew of tropical systems off the Pacific, no bearing, but they will out of the Gulf and the Southwest Atlantic. Some moisture. Welcome news in the Pacific Northwest, easing fires out there.
Does that heat start to recede at all by the time you get to August 12th?
Again, it's this back and forth retrogression, moves out of the east, builds back to the west. We get another little lobe to cool off through the Great Lakes region, the northeast and New England. The wet weather pattern, though, is focused in two areas. Upper Midwest, largely dry for the plains and Corn Belt, active over the southeastern parts of the country.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of heavy-duty grain carts and make the most of your harvest season. Visit brandt.ca for more. Over the past several years, farmers have really focused on maximizing the value of their inputs or celebrating efficiency. It's something that Farm Press has recognized for 25 years in the peanut industry. Shelley Hughley, editor of Southwest Farm Press, joins us now to talk about this year's Peanut Efficiency Awards. Shelley, thanks for joining us.
Joining us in Savannah, we are here at the Southern Peanut Growers Conference to celebrate our 25th class of Peanut Efficiency Award winners. And we're so excited to get to recognize 4 producers, knowing only too well that there are thousands of farmers across this nation that are sustainably producing this nation's food and fiber. So we're excited. We've got 4 winners from across the peanut belt. We have Spring Hill Farms Partnership from the Upper Southeast. We have Shannon Nixon representing the Lower Southeast. And then we have Drew and Milton Parrish from the Delta. And then from my region, we have Jesse Dyke from Denver City, Texas. So it's an exciting week. We will celebrate at a breakfast tomorrow morning and recognize them for their sustainable practices in producing peanuts.
Well, congratulations to those winners. And Shelley, fill us in. How do you figure out who the winners are for an award like this? What do they look at?
Well, I think what's unique about our award, we don't just look at a 40-acre plot. We're looking at their entire operation. We're looking at their yields. We're looking at how they produce those peanuts. And they talk about important aspects as far as variety selection, how they're conserving water and inputs, and their tillage practices, a variety of ways that they are doing everything they can to produce peanuts.
And I'm guessing in a year like this, when where input costs are high, you're hearing a lot of respect for this way of doing business. Shelley, is that right?
Absolutely. I think if you talk to any farmer, they're really concerned about the price of commodities versus the cost of inputs. And you hear families talking about high costs, and the farmers are feeling it just the same. And so they are constantly looking for ways to cut back. But I'll tell you, one of the things my winner said that Jesse Dyke said, he said, when it comes to producing peanuts, that's one place that I do not cut back on inputs, because if I'm going to produce them and I'm going to produce them well and get the yields that I need, I'm going to continue to put into this crop what it takes to do it and do it well.
That's what
and
it
so
takes
they're
to be
conserving
successful,
where they
Shelley.
can. Yes,
Absolutely.
Conserving where they can, but at the same time, putting in what that crop needs.
Fantastic. Folks, you can learn more at farmprogress.com. Search Peanut Efficiency Awards. Shelley Hughley, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks for coming to Savannah.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. It's a big deal to have Dad's tractor or Granddad's tractor, but if it's a tractor that belonged to your great-grandfather, well, now that is something. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, I've met people who searched their entire lives to find Dad's tractor, and they were never quite able to do it. But Hayden Hughes in East Central Illinois has his great-grandfather's tractor. Never got away from them. It's a John Deere 4430. Hayden is the proud owner there in East Central Illinois of great-grandpa Charles's tractor. This was his last tractor. The Hugheses also have Charles's first tractor. That was an Alice WC, but Hayden sure likes the feel of being up in that 4430 cab. When Charles bought this back in the 70s, that was a more than $20,000 tractor, I think. And it brought well over 100 horsepower to the field. There were 5 years in which the 4430 rolled out of the John Deere plant. And rumor has it that Hayden Hughes is building a tractor shed to accommodate that 4430 and maybe some others, but I doubt that any will be more cherished than that John Deere tractor that his great-granddad had there near Tolono, Illinois. Mark Stonk is here now with the weekly Big Iron Report. Come on in here, Mark.
Well, hello, Max. Big Iron and Sullivan Auctioneers are honored to be working for several implement dealerships across the Midwest. On Tuesday, July the 23rd, Van Wall Equipment will sell 40 high-quality, late-model pieces of machinery, like the 2022 John Deere S790 Combine. They have draper heads and corn heads. And on Wednesday, July the 24th, Acres Equipment. Items located in Lincoln, Nebraska include 2021 John Deere 8RX 370 Signature Edition Quad Tracks. Drohard Brothers will be retiring and selling their equipment located by Harper, Kansas. Case IH 9230 four-wheel drive combine. Case IH 8230 combine. Butler Machinery Company will sell 2 2019 Fendt Ideal 8 combines. And on Thursday, July the 25th, Tractor Central will sell 69 items throughout their Wisconsin locations. Items include a 2023 John Deere 5095M mechanical front tractor, plus disc grippers, folding corn heads, and planters. And Max, get ready for an unbelievable Sullivan Collector Car Auction on July the 29th. Check out Big Iron and SullivanAuctioneers.com.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're getting to meet Peyton Reba. She's just completed her term as the Kansas State FFA Vice President. And Peyton, thanks so much for talking with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here this morning.
Tell us a little bit about your background in Cheney, Kansas. Did you grow up on a farm or in the rural part of the country?
Yeah, so Cheney is a pretty rural area. I, however, did grow up in town. So I like to say my closest connection to agriculture was the grass in my backyard and my 2 dogs. So getting into the 7th grade, I found an interest in our FFA program and agricultural education in school, which was really my first step into the ag industry. Fantastic.
And then, of course, you rose through the ranks of your chapter and then state officer. And what were the highlights of your term as serving as the FFA State Vice President?
Yeah, so as a state officer, we're given incredible opportunities to travel across all of Kansas, getting to meet some of the fantastic FFA members that we have in Kansas, now having over 13,000 FFA members in Kansas. So lots of new faces to meet this past year. Along with that, I had the chance to travel to Washington, D.C., which was a highlight for me, having never left the Midwest and never even been on an airplane before. So incredibly cool to get that opportunity and meet with legislators at Capitol Hill and get some advocacy training as well at State Officer Summit. But again, all of those connections that I made with FFA members across the whole state was truly a highlight.
That is fantastic. Peyton, thank you so much for taking the time, and we wish you the best in your future career.
Thank you.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. With all the rain over the past few weeks, some farmers have a little extra time to clean. Chad Colby has some new products to check out.
Over the years in our tech segment, our friends at Protect Systems have offered some amazing solutions to help you clean, polish, and protect your equipment. On this week's tech segment, they got a couple new things. The first is their brand new ceramic rinse product. You can see in this video, I've sped this up 4 times. It took about 3 minutes to do the whole side of this tractor. But essentially, the ceramic rinse product is the perfect complement to their ceramic coating products. It offers a great solution for maintaining your equipment's surface. So after washing equipment and after you've treated it, well, now you can put this rinse product on and look at the finish. Certainly it enhances the water beading. It adds another layer of protection from oxidation. I've noticed on social media lately there's been some guys use this on their Harleys and on their semis as well. The finish just looks incredible. It's another great way to protect your very valuable ceramic finish on your equipment. Now, Protect Systems has spent the last several years going to the Farm Progress Show, and I'm sure many of you have been in their booth. And they talk about their process of clean, polish, and protect. Now, the polish side always gets the wow factor. You can see John bringing the paint back to life on this old Magnum. Now, the interesting part of that tool that John's using, that's kind of the flagship. They offer several different models in different sizes, but kind of everybody needs that big one to start with, that 6-inch random orbital polisher. Now, one of the questions that I've heard myself, and it even for me, is when is that thing going to be cordless? Well, I'm happy to share that they have a new cordless tool. Now, this is unlike any other cordless tool I've ever used. There's no vibration. The gear system's different. Even the battery system is unlike most tools. So if you get an opportunity at the Farm Progress Show coming up, you can check them out there or go to protectsystems.com. You can learn more about it. I know they just got a whole shipment of these in stock. So if you're looking for one, it is a great tool. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. And folks, don't go away. When we come back, we'll hear another tale from our friends up at Steiner Tractor Parts, so leave it here. There's a lot of classic iron out there across America. Max Armstrong, of course, a big fan of that red equipment. But for those of you who are working on classic tractors, you know sometimes it can be tough to find the right parts. Max was talking to our friends up at Steiner about how they solve that issue.
Steiner Stories from the headquarters of Steiner Tractor Parts in Michigan. Patty Pierce visiting here with us, customer service at Steiner Tractor Parts. Sometimes folks have an unusual part they're looking for, I understand. Patty, is that correct?
That's correct. Something we don't have available new in our warehouse.
And you're prepared to help them?
Yes, I do.
How does that usually work?
I would get the information from them, the make, the model of the tractor, the serial number, if it's a carburetor, carb number. We have a source called Allied that we run the information on to help the customer locate the parts. If we're able to locate them, we call the customer back, let them know that they were found. Are they interested in ordering? Yes or no. They want to order, we get the order placed for them, get their parts on the way.
So you have to be somewhat of a detective to help track these down for the owners.
Absolutely, and they give me a run for my money. They tell me I'll never find it, and I tell them, don't threaten me with a good time. And I'm pretty much able to locate what the customer's looking for.
You hate to take no for an answer. Then.
Oh,
I hate
no.
to give no for an answer.
And I like to follow through, make sure they're taken care of.
You must have some great memories of particular customers you've dealt with over the years. You probably almost feel like they're a part of your family.
Absolutely. I have some that I can talk the way I want to and they laugh. They have a good time with me on the phone, take their order. Then you have some that are like you just don't know how to take them with their attitude, and we just get their order done, have a great day, and let them on their way.
We all have better days than others sometimes, and I would imagine you consider it a part of your job to try to brighten someone's day when you can.
Absolutely. I have a bad day. I don't ever show it on the phone. I bring my attitude, get them going, get cheered up, and I say, let's get this rolling, guys.
It really is a part of a family atmosphere that I've noticed here, walking in the doors at Steiner's.
Yes, absolutely. We are not a call center. We are a family-owned business. We take pride in it. We take pride in our customers. They're our number one. Anything is wrong with a part, we get it taken care of for them. We never turn them away and say, nope, you've destroyed it. We just make sure that they're our number one.
You said you're not a call center, and in this day and age, that stands out for somebody like myself. When I'm trying to track down some information, I have a problem, trying to find a part, to be able to connect with a real human being and someone who's on my wavelength, that's pretty special.
It is, and we have 14 to 15 people that answer our calls when they're ringing through. We take care of our customers. We make sure that they can understand us. If we have an issue understanding with a dialect, we slow the customer down so that we can help them through it. We try our best to help people that have had strokes or that can't communicate very well or that talk loud with us. We just say, we'll get this done, just slow down. Sometimes it takes us longer on a call, but we get them taken care of.
Like Max Armstrong, there might be a little bit of a hearing deficit from all
Absolutely.
those years. Yeah, that tractor notch in the hearing range, they call it.
Absolutely. Listen to the loud tractors. Sometimes they can't hear you, and you're like, oh my gosh, got to turn the volume down a bit. Okay, set it over.
Patty Pierce, nice to meet you. Thank you for sharing your chapter of the Steiner stories here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Quality customer service goes a long way. Thank you, Max, for that story from Steiner Tractor Parts. And thanks to you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.